I have to say it's amazing having a team now. We have team
Yeah.
meetings weekly and we talk about cases and issues and science that comes out and articles and go to continuing ed together. And it's better than being one in a way, right? It's more work, but it's also very exciting.
Hey there, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of the Female Empowered Podcast. I have a guest with me today, and I'm very excited to have a guest. I actually love doing guest interviews because it's not just me staring at my computer screen. So today I have Dr. Tanya Goodrich, who is the founder and CEO of Healthy Pelvis Physical Therapy out in, I would say, the Bay Area in California. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Okay. Bay Area, and she is a delight. She's a lovely, bubbly personality. I finally got to meet her in real life at our retreat in May in Texas, which was really great. And she is going to come on. I'm really impressed with everything that you've done in your business thus far, being a solopreneur to start and then growing a team. So why don't you introduce yourself, tell us a little bit about yourself personally, and then what it is that you do with Healthy Pelvis, and then we'll get into some questions.
Thank you so much. Yeah, so I am Tanya Goodrich. I am a physical therapist, and I've been one now for, like 14 years. And I got started actually as a dancer. I have a bachelor's in fine arts in dance from California Institute of the Arts, and I loved it. It was an amazing experience. And as you can imagine, being a dancer doesn't necessarily yield the large bucks. So I knew it was a starting off point, and I knew I was going to end up in a slightly different career, but I am immensely grateful for that experience. And actually, a lot of my family is in healthcare. My dad's a therapist. He actually works at Caltech, and he's the psychologist there. And my mom's a nurse, and my sister's a nurse. And they were all like, have you thought about becoming a physical therapist? And I was like, that's really cool idea, because it's the other side of the brain in a way. I thought for sure I was going to work with dancers and artists backstage in physical therapy, but I decided, so that's the intention that I went into physical therapy school. And then along the way, I discovered another niche, and I ended up down this whole other road of pelvic health, which I think you might get into later, but that's the origin of Tanya Goodrich.
I did not know that, dance. I knew that you were a dancer, but I didn't know that's what you went to undergrad for.
Yeah, I have a bachelor's in fine arts and dance. Yeah.
That's crazy. When I was little, I don't think a lot of people knew this. I danced with Joe Michaels and Mia Michaels when I was really
Oh,
little.
oh
And
yeah.
my dream was to go to the New York School of Arts. And I thought I was going to be like Coco from Fame and then all of this stuff. So then all of a sudden, my dance career came to a screeching halt in high
What
school.
happened?
It was just like, it was a lot.
It
It
wasn't
was
an
a lot.
injury. It was okay.
No, it definitely was not an injury. It was a lot. It was expensive.
Yeah,
My
it
mom
really
was
is.
a single mom.
Oh,
And that's when my like athletic career started. So I literally stopped dancing cold turkey. Michaels had moved on. And so he became really sick and his daughters took over the studio. And then I was like in high school. So that's how I started playing sports. So it's just like a funny story, like a segue, which nobody really wants to hear about me. We all want to hear about you. So let's talk about I'm always really curious at how people go into pelvic health because
mhm.
so we are about 10 years apart in school. So when I
Yeah.
graduated school in 99, I remember having Tracy Scher on the podcast at one point, and we came out of school around the same time. And I was like, nobody was doing this when we were in school. And she talks about how her first clinical experience, was just randomly somebody was practicing pelvic health and they were like, okay, here, stick your hand in someone's vagina. And she was like,
Woo-ha.
I don't know how this happened. Obviously, fast forward, she's uber successful in this industry. But so I'm curious, were they talking more about
No,
this in school? And okay,
no.
so no, in 10 years, it hadn't changed that much. But what drew you to pelvic health? Because this is your bread and butter right now. So how did that
Oh
happen?
yeah, 100%. It's a great question because in school we got very little of this, like maybe a 2-hour lecture. no real emphasis on pelvic health as an actual career or real niche in the field. So what happened is I did one of my clinical rotations at Richmond in Kaiser in the Bay Area. And one of my instructors, he was amazing. He said, "Hey, you should just spend a day with our women's health specialist." And I said, "Okay." And so I followed her around, and I literally, my eyes were like bugging out because I could not believe the the stuff she was talking about. I'm talking bladder, sex, like all of it. I was like, oh my God, I felt like a fly on a wall in the coolest way, like getting to hear like intimate things. And then the discussion was really interesting and it blew my mind. And then this is the kicker. So then I go back to all my friends in physical therapy school and I'm like, oh my God, isn't this fascinating? And they were all like, oh no, we want nothing to do with all that craziness. And that kind of sparked something in me because I did some more research and I was like, whoa, this is really important and really underserved. And oh my God, our country is so far behind. And in France, they're doing, this is the standard of care for pregnant women. And this is before I had kids at this point, but I was still totally floored by this whole world. And I love talking about like sex and poop and peeing. So I knew that, wow, these people aren't interested in it. And it felt kind of magic in a way. So then I just totally shifted gears. I'm talking, speaking of your dance career and turning, like I completely 180'd what I was doing. And this is already like second year end of rotation. And in fact, they don't really want you to specialize in anything in PT school. They really want to create general practitioners and to keep your mind open. But I was like, you know what? I'm going to go into this full force because I can just tell this is going to be my career. And so that's what I did. And then the story of how I actually got in, because there was zero mentorship for this at this point. There are now, which is super great. And I'm super happy about that. But there was zero pelvic mentorship when I was in school. And I fought my way to get one. And so Pelvic Health and Rehab Center, it's a great story. It's where I got launched with Stephanie Prendergast and Elizabeth. She's changed her last name since. But my instructor, my clinical instructor, called the Pelvic Health and Rehab Center, which is like the really only public place in San Francisco, and was like, would it be okay if you took a student? And Stephanie's, yeah, no, we don't really do that. And basically hung up. And so what happened is Teresa kind of forgot that she had already called and called again. And I think the guilt just got to them a little bit and they broke down and said, okay, we'll take her. And that was the beginning of the end in the best possible way. And I really feel some small way that I really helped paved the path of creating a mentorship at UCSF.
Yeah, that's definitely an incredible story because you're right. There was not a lot of mentorship. And because it's such a specialty and such a niche. So if people listening to this might not truly understand the pelvic health, if they're in fitness or you don't really know down the rabbit hole, no pun intended, but it's hard to take a student in that niche because they don't know anything. And even when people used to call me at Pilates and Grove and say, will you take a student? I was like, I will only take someone who's gone through spine because we're so spine heavy that if it's a first year, they don't know their ass from their elbow, right? So the fact that somebody was willing to take a student is a big thing. And you're right. There's way more mentorship now, which is great. There are way more specialty like electives in school that you can take now.
Yeah.
And thankfully it is growing, but it is still unknown by a lot of people. Even
Yeah, it is.
if you take women, let's just take women, even though men have pelvic health issues as well. If you took, I bet you, and I'm curious to see what you think, if you took 10 women between the age of 35 and 45, let's say, and asked them if they knew about pelvic health, like just regular women of all walks of life, how many do you think would know, like, what do they call it, pelvic health or women's health, what that
Yeah.
actually is?
So I would say I can't tell you how exciting it is that even in the last 5 years, there's been a huge growth. Now you have to realize usually when someone's coming into my door, they've heard
Right,
about
they
it in
already
some
know about it.
capacity. But I'm a big hit at parties, right? Because it's still that kind of special niche. No one talks about it. Like, you do what? So yeah, it's still not
So
super
it's
common
still not cool.
knowledge. I don't
Yeah,
know if I
it's
have
not.
specific numbers for you, but it's definitely not.
I think about if I'm out with girlfriends, even say that are
Yeah.
not in health and wellness,
Yeah.
and these are the things we talk about, right? Like I literally
Yeah.
sent my best friend, and I almost created a social media post on it this morning that was like, you're in a different stage of life when you text your friend in the morning or thank you so much for that recommendation. I actually took a real shit this morning and I feel so much better. But you're in a different phase in life when that is your morning text to one of your friends, like
Oh, yeah.
having a normal bowel movement or not waking up with your bed soaked in sweat because you're in the middle of
Well,
menopause,
now
right?
menopause. So I love that you brought that up because I feel like pregnancy postpartum now, I would say, is the biggest
Yeah,
awareness piece of pelvic health. I feel like that's gotten the biggest fanfare, and rightfully, if you have a baby, you should get rehab for it. It just blows
for
my
sure.
mind. We joke that the baby either comes out the sunroof, right? C-section, or the door, vaginal.
That's
Yeah,
awesome.
I know
Sunroof or through the door. I love that.
that's
That's
pretty awesome.
hilarious.
And
Yeah.
part of the joke is that it deserves attention, right? No matter which way the baby comes out, that's physical trauma. I don't care how you look at it. And I'm
Uh,
tired of women
yeah,
just being told, just deal or time, or that's the cost of having babies. It's totally absurd. So I'm super happy that has become just a little bit more well known, especially social media has been really great at like spreading the
for
word
sure.
to women. Now you have the whole new realm of menopause, which is like this dark black hole of women's health, let alone, I would say, public awareness, right? So it's actually, I get to tell you something today for the first time because it's being launched,
What's
but I
that?
have just been asked to join the medical clinical advisory board to a menopause tech company, starting the menopause wing. So it is a huge deal. Yeah,
So amazing,
it is. It's,
folks. And she's announcing it on the Female Empowered
yeah,
podcast.
yeah.
It's
And we're in
amazing,
contract now, so
Tanya.
I don't want to reveal which one just in
No,
case.
no, of course. That's so exciting.
It's a huge deal. It's a huge deal. So I am very pumped, but it is because I also feel like the menopause piece of women's health has been, just to say dark ages doesn't even give it credit. Like it is literally, and I knew it was coming. This wave is coming. And the genitourinary symptoms, which is just fancy for your genitals and your urinary system, become hugely involved because the estrogen plummets. And there's a ton of estrogen receptors down there. And of course, they're going to take a hit. But I'm tired of women just having to suffer with it. Like we have
Yeah.
modern medicine for a great reason. And the science has changed around estrogen and hormone therapy. And yet practitioners are behind the science of
Yeah.
it. So it's, again, this is the next wave you're going to hear.
No, for
Love
sure.
it.
I'm in it. And I can just say one of the things that I think being in it now is that it's similar. So you have children, I have children. We
Mhm.
birth children.
Yes.
So what is it's the same. Nobody can tell you what that's like until you go through it. I
Yeah.
can tell you what my experience is, but your experience might be very different. I
Yeah.
could tell you what my experience was like
Yes.
working through infancy, like with my kids. Your experience could be very different.
Yeah.
I suffered really bad postpartum with my first son, which was completely out of left field for me. Not everyone does. So the issue too is very similar in menopause. So
Yes.
I could talk about my experience. Your experience might be different. And I think that's what's one of the things that I'm realizing is that it's so different for so many women. And so it doesn't get a ton of attention and people don't talk about it a lot. I think it's going to get better now that Gen X is going through it because we basically are just like, fuck everything.
No
Um,
gatekeeping. Yeah. But
yeah.
yeah.
So, but then here's what I would definitely say is it hit me like a ton of freaking bricks. I was like chucking along,
Mhm.
healthy, thin, feeling great. All of a sudden, boom, I was like, what the fuck? What the hell is this? And I'm glad that you talked about the estrogen and in the down there areas. So I think a lot of women, I'm luckily in healthcare, so I understand the whole thing. But
Yeah.
if you were any type of incontinence
Yeah.
before menopause,
Yeah.
right? Which I had 2 10-pound babies. So you can
Yes.
experience, you can understand what
You have them through the
that
door.
was. I had them through the door.
There you go.
So you can talk about, but it had gotten better, right? It had definitely gotten better. And all of a sudden menopause hit and the drop in estrogen that happened
It's real.
so fast to me. I went from being great, like being conscientious of it, but knowing what I was supposed to do, to all of a sudden being like, bitch, get out of the way in the bathroom line because I can't freaking wait behind 5 people. That's not going to happen. Right.
Yeah.
And nobody talks about it.
Oh yeah, nobody talks about this. And I love that you also talk about it being a very individual experience, because some women, and this is crazy to me, like some women choose to have babies and some women don't, right? But
Right.
all women have a one-way ticket to menopause, right? So that's not,
That's true.
it's non-negotiable, right? However, some women skate through menopause and have no problems, and someone get hit like with a ton of bricks. And most women will be in the middle, right? But
Mhm.
this is the
Mhm.
big deal. I want women to know this, and to
Yeah.
know that there's symptoms, which are not just one thing, hot
No.
flashes. There's 37 symptoms that are a piece of it, because obviously estrogen's in literally every part of your body. So yeah,
Anxiety,
symptoms can vary.
lack of sleep, weight gain is
Mood.
real. I've gained 25, but also it came during COVID. So it was like a slow, like I was like, is
Yeah,
it COVID?
right.
Is
You're
it
like, is it COVID? What's
menopause?
that?
And I went through menopause really young. I started going through menopause at 42, and I started having symptoms, and my doctors were like, it's not menopause. I'm like,
Perimenopause. You're like, yes, it is.
yes, it is. Like,
Yeah.
it's nothing else. They're like, you're too young. I
Yeah.
was losing hair. They actually thought I had alopecia at one point, because I was like, it's only hair in my head. It's not like hair in the whole. Anyways, it's like thank God I at least knew enough to advocate for myself. But then
Yeah.
I started thinking of what are other women
They're
going through?
suffering. And
Yeah.
there's a lot of tolerance for female suffering in our society. And it really needs to change, which is where the
Yeah.
education and where the empowerment comes into options. So it's a big deal.
So do you feel comfortable then maybe because I think a hot topic with even a lot of women in my circles, like my friends, we talk about hormone replacement therapy, like the
Yeah.
ins and outs. Do you feel comfortable talking about some of the new studies that have come out about hormone
Yeah.
replacement therapy and what the studies are currently saying?
Sure, I can educate people on the current science that's out there, with, of course, a caveat that I am a physical therapist. I do
I'm
not
not a physician.
prescribe any medications. However, I am educated in this field because, of course, I need to be. So I would say, up to date on all the recent science that is out there. Yes, I do feel qualified to talk about that, and education that I would give any patient that comes in. I would send them to the right people. And that, to me, right there is the biggest piece, is to just not go to your provider, get pushback, and then be done, but to really see a menopause specialist. Because in the early 2000s, there was a big study done by the government, and they wanted to look at the effects of what is going on with estrogen. And so they ran this study and they started doing it. And what they found was so alarming, and I put it in quotes because it was alarming based on how they ran the study, that it increased the risk of heart disease and breast cancer. So they halted the entire study and said, hey, this is so scary, we're going to stop it all. And so that's the attention that it has last received, and it has had a devastating, I would say, repercussions to the masses because of that study. Now, it turns out it was a poorly done study, and I can go into why, but I think it's complicated. They included too many people in the group. It wasn't a well done study, and it's also the way in which we administer hormone replacement therapy now is different than we did back then. For example, now you're not going to take it orally, most likely. You're going to get it into a patch or a gel, which is absorbed through the skin and not through the liver. And if you have a uterus still, you also need progesterone. So that's the caveat now, is that the science has changed. And all I want you to do is you can start researching it yourself. Also, there's been some phenomenal New York Times articles, and this menopause.org. I would say that anyone who now knows and has researched this topic is the benefits of hormone replacement therapy now outweigh the risks by a long shot for most people. Now, if you have a breast cancer in your family, and if you have heart disease, it does need to be specialized. This is not why you just go to Walgreens or your local store and you just buy estrogen. That's not how this is done. It needs to be prescribed by somebody who knows what the heck they're talking about. So that's the caveat. But the good news is that hormone replacement therapy should really be shouted from the rooftops, because if taken within 10 years of menopause, all the symptoms that you were just talking about, from mood disorders to crankiness to hot sweats to night sweats to peeing your pants. It's huge and it's very exciting. I'm really excited to be a woman today, especially at my age, because even for myself, to get personal, literally low hanging fruit is the vaginal cream estrogen that you can take. And that's super great because that's literally just getting absorbed down in your crotch.
Right.
But it's amazing for vaginal dryness. And I had to
No, it's
push
great.
hard to get that. And I'm in early 40s, totally within the perimenopause appropriate age. Menopause is on the average age of 51, but symptoms can show up a decade before. So do the
For
math.
sure.
It's crazy. So
Yeah.
that's
No,
my
it
big
is
long-winded
crazy.
answer.
It's not a long-winded answer. I thought, first of all, we could talk about this for 3 days and
That's
like
really
the
true.
science of everything. But it's a great idea of like exactly what happened with those initial studies, right?
Mhm.
It's, if you remember, I don't know, I think it was in the 80s. Do you remember when all the diets were like low fat
Are
and
you
like
kidding
how
me?
the
Snack?
government,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. So
Zero,
so now you,
zero.
exactly. It's that's why when people look at studies, it's important to understand how was the study done, who did the study, and be able to read into it. But now you're absolutely right. There's new information, and when there's new information, we should research new information. And you're right, it's now topical. I take it's like a gel that I rub on
Yeah.
my forearms every morning.
Mhm.
And I will say that if I forget to take it, and sometimes it goes like a while and I forget, my symptoms get dramatically worse. And then as soon as I remember to start being like, oh my God, I forgot to take this again. It's like
Huge.
night and day. And it's not orally, right? It's like a little gel. And then so it's great. It's really been helpful to me. And there's something that the body actually needs estrogen up until a certain point. And so that drastic drop in estrogen is my recommendation from a healthcare perspective is, and I don't know if you feel the same way, is to have someone test your hormone levels. And if you're not menstruating, so here was my problem, and I'm getting into like TMI, but I was actually not menstruating. And so when I was going to the doctor, they were doing my blood levels, but we didn't know where in the cycle.
Problem with that test, actually, you don't need a test anymore to diagnose menopause, and it's puberty. Because if you take a test on any day, your hormone levels will vary. So you
Yeah,
don't need a test for a 12-year-old girl that grows breast
no,
buds and hair to say she's in puberty, right? It's
right.
diagnosed based on age and symptoms. The same thing now is happening again. It's almost like strange adolescence again in reverse. So you do not need a
You don't
test
need
to
it.
prescribe
No,
that you're in menopause or
menopause.
perimenopause, right?
Yeah,
It's age and symptoms, and it's
yeah.
constantly balanced. So that's a really
I
great thing that you brought up.
I finally went to a functional medicine doctor because all
Yeah.
these things were happening. And I was like, there's something, it's not what they're saying. They're just like, you're busy and stressed, you run a business, all this stuff. I was like, no, something's going
Up.
on. So I finally went to a functional medicine doctor who did blood work every week for
Oh wow. Okay. Yeah.
a month so that she could actually be like, we'll catch your cycle. Cause even if you're not menstruating, you still go through like the cycle.
Sure.
So she was able to actually look at my hormone levels through all the cycles and say, look at, is it the estrogen, progesterone, testosterone, and put me on the dose, the combination of what was going to work specifically for me.
That's awesome.
So that was great for me because the funny thing was, she said, she looked at the reports and she was like, you have kids, right? And I was like, yes, I have kids. She's like, are you done having kids? And I was like, oh yeah, I'm done having kids. And she's okay, good. Cause like officially you're done having kids. Like she just wanted
You're
to
not
make
having kids
sure
anymore.
that I wasn't planning on having kids.
Right.
That was the first time anyone said the words, you are no longer ovulating. You are not producing anything right now that is going
Yeah.
to turn into a pregnancy, which actually made me cry a little bit because I didn't want any more kids, but it's just
I
like,
know that I
it's just
can't.
like
Yeah, it's a
time has
milestone.
end.
It's
I wasn't like, I didn't want it. Like if she had told me, oh, we found out you're pregnant, I would have cried more, but it was just one of those things. It's okay. That's like an end of an era,
an end of an era.
right? Kind of
Yeah.
thing. So I do think it's great that people like you are out there educating the community. It's one of the reasons that I want to help female business owners that are doing these want to call them cutting edge, but necessary needs in our community, helping more women, having more
Yeah.
impact. Because if your business is more successful, it will help impact more women, not only in your own community, but again, if you're going to be on like a task force, it's going to help educate women around the world. That's amazing. So
Yeah.
let's talk a little bit about Healthy Pelvis. How
Yeah.
did Healthy Pelvis get its start?
Yes. I got launched into creating my own company very early on in my career. So I had gotten, as we talked about, I got in a mentorship at the Pelvic Health and Rehab Center in San Francisco. And I was there for about a year. And then I worked for them for another year. So that's like 2 years in. And then my husband got a job transferred down further south in San Francisco. So now I'm in Mountain View. And so we moved here and there was very little pelvic health. There wasn't like a center or an institute. And I said, you know what? I know enough. I know what I'm doing. And so I said, I want to have my own flexibility anyway. I'm going to start my own thing. And so
And did you have kids at this time? Sorry to interrupt you. Did you have children at this time?
so yes, I have one
Okay.
kid at this time. I have a baby. Yeah, I have a baby. And I was like, this is great. I can work 3 days a week and be home 2 days a week and kind of grow this business organically. And that's exactly what happened. I set up shop. Actually, one of my best friends in the whole world, who I met at physical therapy school, Elisa, had her own facility as well. And she's like, come rent space for me. And I said, oh, how can I say no to that? So I was joining her 3 days a week, but having my own business, just renting space from her. And we still do that, by the way. And it was amazing. And I was doing my own thing. And it was just me. It was just me. And I was like, you know what? I'm not going to do any marketing. I'm just going to be the best PT ever. And then I'm going to try to just tell all these people to tell their people. And because I didn't want too much business anyway. So that worked really well. And that's when I got a little bit smart, or just in the sense of I tried to get reviews of my work. So I would start Yelp. And Yelp, I think it's still big. I feel like it was even bigger like 10 years ago. That's how most people found anything related to health in general. So people were posting, and then people, especially moms, are really great at sharing information with each other. And Facebook moms groups are incredible just for many resources. And pelvic health has been one of them. I think it still is.
Yeah.
And
We actually call it word of mom instead of word of
oh, I
mouth.
love that.
Word
That's
of
so
mom.
true.
It's so true,
We're
right?
the net, like,
Word of mom.
yeah. And word of mouth is still the biggest deal. Like same for me. Like I want to know about a good practitioner or hairdresser from a friend.
Mhm.
So I would say that's how I got started, and it became somewhat successful. It kept growing.
How long did you stay solopreneur before you
Yeah,
were like, I need to
a
bring
long
someone on?
time, years. And
Years.
then, yeah, so I started like lightly, I would say 2 days a week, and then I was 3 days a week, and then I was 4 days a week because the demand kept growing. And I was always like, I don't want to grow my business. It's too much of a headache. I don't know that world, which is true. I didn't really know that world, but I know how to be a great PT. So it worked really well for many years. I just ebbed and flowed with enough patience to make it work.
Mhm.
And I would say 7 years, right? About, yeah, 7, 8 years. But then at about 8 years, the demand was too much. It stopped working. My business stopped working for me. I became stressed. I didn't have enough time for everybody. I felt like I could get them on my calendar, but I didn't have a time for them to come back. And it became more stressful than it did. It was like a blessing and a curse, right? Your business is so successful that you don't have time for everybody. But that's also horrible. It's a sign that something
Yeah.
isn't working.
Yeah.
So
Because you feel badly about not being able to get people in because you're like, these
yeah.
people need help. These people need my services. They, and I feel badly about not being able to get them
Oh
in.
yeah. And then you become
Yeah.
less of a good practitioner because you just don't have that much time
Right.
to see them. And so yeah. So again,
And then you
it just
might be
stopped working.
shifting people out sooner that could still use some of your therapy just because you're like, okay, it's what's the word I'm looking for? It's like triage, right? Who needs
Yes.
the help more? You're like, oh, this person can do their home program. I got to get this other person in. So
Yeah,
yeah.
which is not great. And this is what I tell business owners today, or PTs, like, your business works until it doesn't work, and then you need to change. Like, it's
100%.
you have to pivot. I still do that. It works, and maybe it stops working. And then same with a kid, right? When you're a
Yeah.
mom, things will work, and all of a sudden it'll stop working, and you have to do something. Your nap schedule
Gotta make a
changes,
change.
right? It stops working. So
I
that's
also think it
that.
was interesting. So for people listening, if you're thinking about starting a business, I always tell people this. So Tanya moved to a new area and she saw a need. She saw something missing in the marketplace. She saw there was no pelvic health there, right? So what did she do? She was like, here's the need. I have a solution. I'm going to put my need, like my solution with the need, right? So you match, there's a need there and there's a solution that she can deliver. So that's, again, when people are like, how did you decide? Usually you find a need and you
Yeah.
create, you solve it. And that's how, and so that I think is great. And so then I also love that you said it worked until it didn't work anymore.
Mhm.
And that's usually the case with almost anything in life. You go through these growing pains, then you start to get stressed, and then you decide at some point, I need to make a change. And so that change was, who did you bring on first? Who was your first hire?
So Jess is my first hire,
And
and
she's a clinician.
she was a clinician. Yeah. And she was practicing in Wyoming. And I knew her from before with Elisa. She was a student at the time, following around the clinic, and she had gotten into pelvic health and she was looking for a change. And so Elisa was an amazing matchmaker. She says, you should talk to Jess. And so I was, and she would like to come back to the Bay Area. And so then I was like, I really could use another set of pelvic hands. So you should come join my practice. But that was a lot of work because I didn't know how to do it. So it was not easy. I get a little tingly because it's so hard to switch from like practitioner mode to business owner mode. And I still feel like I'm learning. I still feel like I get the tingles because I feel like I play one on TV just because it's hard. It's hard to run your own business. And I'm just, it's awesome though. It's cool because you can grow, you can evolve, you can be a person you didn't think you were before. I never in my wildest dreams thought I would be owning my own roughly successful physical therapy practice with now a handful of us. So
Yeah.
it's cool.
It's
You
uber
can change.
successful. Let's say you're really successful. So give yourself kudos. So you did it. But it is true. Like none of us, I didn't have entrepreneurship modeled for me growing up. I never thought in a gazillion years this would be reality. And it is a big leap going from practitioner
Yeah.
to manager, and then manager to leader, and then leader to visionary. Those are the biggest leaps, by the way. And most of us could treat whatever our specialty is in PT or Pilates or yoga, could teach a class or treat a client with our eyes closed. It's like riding a bike for us. The other skill
Yeah.
sets are what we have to lean into. So let's fast forward to today.
Mm-hmm.
How many people are on the Healthy Pelvis team in totality? So even if they're part-time or full-time, like how many people do you have working for Healthy Pelvis?
Yeah. So there's 3 physical therapists, pelvic PTs, and on staff, I have now a full-time admin assistant who's
Great.
virtual, who really helps run the business on the back end. Yeah.
And so when did you hire Jess? Jess, what year?
Yeah. So it was 2 years ago.
Oh, so yeah.
Yeah, it's been 2 years. And then Eileen
What?
now is a part of the
Forgot about
program.
that.
And
Yeah.
I have to say, it's amazing having a team now. We have team
Yeah.
meetings weekly, and we talk about cases and issues and science that comes out and articles, and go to continuing ed together. And it's better than being one in a way, right? It's more work, but it's also very exciting and fulfilling.
Yeah. Collaborating. What were some of the things that you did not know prior to hiring? So you don't know what you don't know. What were some of the lessons you learned in hiring? There's
Yeah,
probably a
many
lot,
lessons.
but
Oh man, it's so hard. It's just so hard because you don't know so many things. I would say this: if you weren't in the room, you happen to be in the room. But learning from I really wanted to learn from someone who knew this business, right? I wanted someone who was a physical therapist and had some understanding of the business, and then also was further along in the road ahead of me. And when Elisa introduced me to your work, I was like, oh, I can just tell this woman's awesome. I really wanted a female as well. It's just, I wanted a female who had gone and walked the steps before me. And you had really created such a great model in such a clear way, and had like, I was just blown away by your business and having I have two spots now, right? So they expand the peninsula and they're like 25 minutes away from each other. So in a way, it's amazingly located because I have people who an hour apart from each direction will come to the spots. So that's been amazing to have two facilities. And yeah, so I would say honestly, like I did know what the heck I was doing. So I winged it a little bit from there. And then I made an offer because I needed to draw her in too, because again, you're talking about
moving, she's going to move to a new
yeah. And
place.
then I also didn't know how much I could feed her because this was so brand new. I don't know how many patients I can fill, but I know I can fill you somewhat. And then again, it just grew so well. A little bit of promotion, a little bit of marketing, just the email list that I had grown. I had had a template. I don't think I had not joined your inner circle yet. I had just winged it based on what I knew I needed to attract her, and it worked. And I'm so glad it did. But then, of course, you have just like pivots in a business. So I feel like the answer to your question is I knew nothing, and then I tried to make it up a little bit as I went. But it was still smart enough because I needed another set of amazing hands. So
You needed that so that you could, one, help your customers, your clients,
yes,
save your sanity, and ultimately save the business. Because if you go under, who's there to
yeah, nobody.
help? So between Jess and Eileen,
Yeah.
what are some things that you learned from like a hiring process that you may have changed between
Well,
Jess and Eileen?
yeah,
And
and I'm still in the process of making the change. Right now, I was trying to offer like a base salary, for example. I was trying to really give like a generous amount per week so that no matter what, if I could bring in no patients for them, they would at least be able to eat rice and beans. And I still am really proud of that. However, it wasn't scaled appropriately because my policies and procedures weren't in place. So if you work 10 hours, you shouldn't get the same base as somebody who was working 25. So that's a change that definitely didn't feel right. So I needed to make happen. So I would say, of course, the policies and procedures, I'm still working on the nuts and bolts of making it totally smooth, but I've made great changes. So I would say that those are the things that I would say most clinicians need the most help with. And that's where they need to literally level up.
yeah. And listen, I always say something. I think it was Maya Angelou. I think I heard this like on Oprah when she was on Oprah one time. She said, do what you can. I'm going to butcher it, but it's something like do what you can until you're better. And then when you know better, you do better.
Yeah.
Right. So instead of beating ourselves up because we offered somebody more money than not that they deserve, because everyone deserves a tremendous amount of money. It's more like that the business could afford. And when better, and you look at your business in a different way,
Yeah.
then you make different decisions.
Yeah.
And so instead of saying, I did the same thing. I at one point was just like, oh, this is what everyone else is paying in the industry. So that's what I did. And I was then creating offers different for everyone. If you came in, I'd be like, oh, you're going to get X. And then if Jane came in, Jane would get Y. And that's just, I don't even know what happened. So I was pulling numbers out of my ass. And so now there's a system to follow. And I think there's always wiggle room, certainly wiggle room, because there are times where you need to entice somebody to come. And there are other times where the only thing I tell people though is make sure that you have the business's best interest at heart. Because if your business cannot remain financially solvent, the
Yeah.
doors will close and you will be able to help nobody and nobody will have a job. So learning little by little and then knowing, okay, you know what, next time we make an offer, I'm going to bring this up or I'm going to create it and curate it in this specific way. That's going to be better for the business, better for the customers, better for the clinician. And
Yeah.
also what sometimes happens too is like there comes a point in an owner's life that they're going to start to remove themselves from the business a little bit, right? For a number of reasons. One, we get older. Being a full-time clinician as you get older is hard. It's like mentally draining, it's physically
Physically. Yeah.
draining. So it's hard. So at some point, a lot of times clinicians are like, I want to decrease my caseload. And by caseload, we mean patient load. And also, as your business grows, there's other things that need your attention,
Yes. Yes.
right? And so it's important to not just keep adding things on your plate. And it's one of the things that I try to teach and support people on, is making that transition to saying, these are now new tasks that I have to do. And we still only have the same 24 hours in a
Yeah.
day. And so something's got to give. And what I don't want to give is people's personal sanity and their home life and things like that, because that's not sustainable. It
And
might
then
be sustainable in a season. Like if
yeah.
Eileen got sick and she was out for 2 weeks, like, could you come to carry her caseload? Of course, but that's not going to happen for like, you can't do that for 2 years. It's too much.
Yeah. And also part of the issue, I'm excited because I'm also creating a mentorship, right? I
Yeah.
definitely feel like we have a tried and true methods of how to treat. So actually somebody is going to be joining my mentorship, I think, and then will be turned into another healthy pelvis physical therapist, which I'm very excited about. And actually, I'm trying to I'm sending her to school again to learn more of the pediatric physical therapy, because talk about a niche that like really gets not enough attention. So I'm excited about that, growing that side. And then yes, now I'm going to also be pivoting and running a business and helping, like it's only 10 hours a month, but like of creating this new menopause wing of a tech company. So I definitely think I should probably shift my caseload again. And maybe that's where that mentorship comes in. But that's, again, there's not enough pelvic PTs out there in a way. So
Right.
I'm hoping that all the PT schools out there are growing more as well, so that
I
people can,
think they are. And I think
yeah.
more and more people coming out of school want to do this right out of school too. Like,
Yes,
they're like, this is
yes,
what I
a
really want
lot.
to do out of school, versus back in the day it would be something maybe down the road that
Yeah.
you found out about. And you're right, there wasn't a lot of mentorship. So one, I also think you love mentoring. You like teaching. You like
Yeah, I do. I
fostering
do.
that. And
Yeah.
so there's a beauty to being able to step into something that you truly love and are passionate about. Those are the kind of things that don't feel like work to us, right?
Yeah,
Like,
that's so true.
honestly, coaching calls to me and working with other business owners and doing like retreats doesn't feel like work to me. It's
That's why I
so
love talking
amazing.
to you about it, because there's just like this natural air, as if you were like Yoda of the business. Yeah.
Yoda of the business. I love it. What does Yoda say? I forgot what he said. Anyways, so you have been in the inner circle. It's coming up on a year, if you can believe it, in
Pretty
July.
crazy.
So what do you think some of the things that stand out for you that you have absorbed in this last year that you think really helped propel you, whether it's even personally as a business
Yeah.
owner, professionally? What do you think some of the things are that helped allowed you to?
Yeah, I think it's crystal clear. Just providing a real framework and a real clear category of the nuts and bolts of so many things I didn't have before. And you've just been so generous. And really, everybody in the circle has been so generous of sharing, like the moms groups, right? We just
Mhm.
share all the things and help each other. And no question is too stupid. So just throwing things out there has been huge. So both the combined community of the inner circle and everybody in the same zone working on their business, because again, this is not PT school, this is business school. In a way, this is business school on the fly, which is so fun, because
Business
it's
school on the
the
fly. I
business
love
school on
it.
the fly, only the things that are relevant to you need to learn about, versus going to school and learning all this like hubbub. Like now it's just like the clinical pearls, but of the business. So
Yeah.
that's where I think you've come in really helpfully, and you had just really clear. I would just go on walks and listen to podcasts. I would just listen to Krista in my ear, and you had this whole series from the finances, and it was so well structured. And it was like hours and hours of information. So I would call it walking and Krista learning. I would say, guys, tell my family, got to go on my walk. And
And you got to
it was
put your
awesome.
AirPods in, because I curse a lot, obviously, as you can tell by listening to this podcast.
Yeah.
So I'm always like, if you have young kids in the room, please, like, explicit warning,
But
earmuffs.
I swear like a sailor too. So you are in good
Exactly.
company.
Yeah. But I'm
Um,
always like, if you're listening with young kids in the house, like, I'm like, I might throw an F bomb
just
from
heads
time to
up.
time. Also, I think you are willing to do the work, right? So there's a difference between, like, I can give everyone advice, but I can't do, it's like a patient, right? You can give
Yeah.
people advice, but you can't do the work for them. And so it's people, and Tanya's business model is very different than my business model,
Yeah.
right? And it's different than Elisa's business model. And what's important is that we don't have to look to the old 1970s, 80s, and even 90s vision of what CEOs look like and did. We can create our own version of that for
Yeah.
the 2023 female CEO that maybe has children or doesn't have children or is taking care of a parent or whatever have you, right? I have colleagues now that they're their businesses are doing so well, their partner has chosen to stay home and be like the
Yeah.
main parent. So things are different. Times they are changing, my friends, and we can create whatever it is that we want to create for ourselves that fills us up,
Yeah.
that we're passionate about, and works for you as an individual. And as I wish more practitioners realize how much we spend on our PT education plus continuing education after that. But it's a different mindset when people are like, oh, wait, I don't to spend money on like business mentoring, but you can be the best clinician in the world and your business still close if you can't make it
Yeah.
work.
I,
So
it's a no-brainer. If you need to level up, if you want to hire more people, like you can't wing it. I can tell you from
you
experience,
can't wing
it's
it.
not
Yeah.
worth it. Because the mistakes, once you get someone in the door, you can't just wing it. You have to level up. And that's why your program has been really so helpful. So thank you.
Yeah. Thank you. It's been a joy to work with you and the other women in the group. And selfishly, I think that the women, I think like my coach would tell me it's because what you put out, that's what you attract. But I just think we have such a great group of women. There's no ego in the group. People share information freely.
Oh
We
yeah.
even talk about I if you guys saw the pictures and videos from our retreat in May, like that was the some of us meeting for the first time ever in person was amazing. And I think as women, I think we also need that. Like, I think we also need that camaraderie, that listening, that ability to be free and just talk and laugh and shed some tears if we needed to. And just, I always feel now like I have friends all over the country. And so it's just been a joy to have you in the group, and your personality, your bubbly personality is so funny.
Thank-
So I know that you're going to continue to be successful wherever this takes you, but let's let everyone know where they can find you so that and let's tell them about your podcast too, because I think that's also really great because you guys share some really important information.
Yeah. So Papaya Talk is something that I created with Elisa. We have a bunch of episodes out. We are currently taking a break. We are pausing as well. So there's a whole host of talks waiting for you, and it might be special edition. So yeah, so Papaya Health is a way to find us, and Papaya Talk is our podcast. And then I am also healthypelvis.com will take you directly to us. We do virtual appointments as well, if that's something that you would like, with all three of us who are very specialized. And then yeah, to be continued. I definitely did want to say that I can put, I'm thinking on the notes section, we can put some of those
Oh,
where
yeah.
I got all of my information on
Oh, cool.
hormones, so
Yeah.
that it's a resource guide, just so
Yeah.
people don't think I made anything up. It was all things that I,
No, I'll get those
yeah.
links from you, and we're gonna
Okay.
link everything in the show notes.
Okay,
If
great.
you're a young PT listening to this, or even an older PT that's interested in mentorship,
Yeah.
reach out to Tanya. She's an
Yeah.
amazing mentor and she is a wealth of knowledge. She's really smart and she knows her shit. So like, she's not faking it. She's way past the fake it to make it stage. And she's in the Bay Area. Elisa, who is the founder and CEO of On the Move Physical Therapy, is also in the Bay Area. They share space. She's also a member of the Inner Circle who's been, and like I said, all of us have different business models that serve us and what we want in our life. And it's just been a joy to have you guys in the group. So reach out to her, tag her, DM her over on Instagram, check out her website. If you know anyone in the area too that's looking for a really amazing women's health expert, she is the one to reach out to. So that would be great. So thank you so much for joining me.
Thank
I
you for having
really
me.
enjoyed it. I really enjoyed this conversation. We could talk for hours and hours. I might actually, looking at how long it was, we might actually split this up into 2 episodes. You'll get 2 Tanyas in 2 weeks,
Bye.
but we'll see when the editing comes out. And until next time, my friends,
Until next
bye for
time.
now.